Welcome back to the Carrot and Stick podcast, a podcast series where we look to get under the skin of all things sales, management, and motivation to understand what really makes our wonderful industry tick. Today, I'm talking to the CEO of Skillsearch, Richard Fisher, who self-professedly says that he has not taken the traditional route through recruitment, hasn't founded his own business, no longer works as a consultant, but finds himself leading a business as one that he joined when it was just 3 people as a director and has seen it go through all these years to where it is today at just over 40 people. We have a really interesting conversation today with some mantras that I absolutely love. Things like, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And it's also all about giving people the room to make mistakes and grow in a controlled way. Richard's been a long-time customer of ours as well, has some really good reflections on using data to motivate people, and in a way also launches a little bit of an attack on the title of this podcast, but we forgive him because it turned into a really interesting conversation. So without further ado, Richard Fisher, CEO of Skillsearch. Richard, thank you so much for jumping on. Really appreciate you giving us your time today to have a conversation. Now, you and I were speaking a couple of minutes before we hit the record button, and you were saying that you're kind of the guy in the middle of the industry. You're not someone that's kind of working solely as a consultant, but you're also not someone who's going out there and setting up businesses. So it sounds like you got pretty close. Do you want to start there by giving us a little bit of color around what that journey has looked like across the last 27 years and how ultimately you became the CEO of Skillsearch?
Yeah, okay. There is no potted history, I think, when you've been in the industry for 27, 28 years. So I guess you have to sit comfortably for a bit. But like many in the 90s, I got into recruitment by accident. I walked into a recruitment agency on Oxford Street and said, I'm looking for a job. And they said, why don't you come and work here? And that was the entry level into the industry. After that, I flipped. After 12 months selling high-end secretarial, I flipped into technology. And that's when I think it was evident that I found my groove. I joined Computer Futures. So I was one of the many Computer Futures and S3 alumni that are out there in the market.
And there are a lot of you out there.
And there are a lot of us out there. I had 6 years there, had the opportunity to kind of chase a different perspective. I took S3 into parts of Europe, came back to the UK, went through, I think there's a common theme, right? That when you've been somewhere so long and you become part of the furniture, when you leave, where you go next might not be the right move. And I think it's a really common theme when you see people leave and they seem to bounce quickly. So bounced through somewhere else fairly quickly, had a really good long stint at a company called Square One. Then had my kind of horror moment for a couple of years after the kind of 2008 recession, where it might be, a common theme, I guess. Just because you have 2 years when you can't seem to hold down anything doesn't mean you're crap at the job. So my message out there would be stick with it. If you're confident in your ability, stick with it. And then found my way to Skillsearch. So as you say, I didn't found the business. I was brought on board initially, straight away as a director, but a director of 3 people. So I feel like the journey has been kind of left to me, and I've run it with the right support, external support and internal, to grow the business to where we are today, which is a 40-odd business specialising in historical enterprise tech, but mainly the video game space.
Space is very near and dear to my heart, as you maybe can tell by the Pikachu above my head as well, right?
Yeah.
So I used to work in the games industry, so when I saw it, I was just like, this is perfect.
Yeah, it's a fun space.
It is a very fun space at the best of times. Very difficult at the moment, but I think is the case for a lot of industries around the world today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were really hoping. It's a different kind of cycle to the rest of the tech industry, because we went bonkers during COVID because everybody was at home playing games. So all the studios quickly established how to build a remote working model. We were absolutely bonkers. Because the market went bonkers, that led to external investment, non-gaming companies buying into the gaming industry. And we had a good ride, but about 12 months ago, a lot of those companies started to work out how they could cut cash. And this had a knock-on effect to the industry. It was, I think, the final calculation was about 5% of the global working games market were made redundant last year.
Crazy.
And it's not really stopped the last couple of months with PlayStation and EA announcing big layoffs.
It's crazy, yeah. I think everyone across every industry is wondering when the layoffs end, when everything starts to get back to what many would probably dub normal, although some are now saying ultimately the last couple of years, 21, 22 have been those boom years, and this is, air quotes, I hate using the phrase, the new normal. That was what we were saying about COVID. Now it's much more about the job market and the way that the industry is trending, right? It's a tough time, to be fair. It's really, really tough, and obviously I think we're all hoping that come H2 it starts to recover.
Yeah, but when you've been in industry long enough, you can see this cyclical, and I always consider, or I do now, consider tougher times a great opportunity, because when you're busy, your business actually, it can be, brilliant as it is when you look at the superficial revenue figures coming in, you can shortcut a lot of things. And when you're that busy, you miss stuff. So, when the market changes like this, I always think it's a brilliant opportunity to just reflect. I know we're going to move on to it, but you look at the metrics a little more closely. You look at where the gaps are in the business, and I always think that the best recruiters out there are the people that cope with these times, and they come out of it stronger and better.
You start thinking about the changes that can be made when it's a little bit of peacetime, arguably, rather than it's all hands on deck. We've got too much to do, no time to really pause and think about things, whereas now you do, right?
100%.
Love it.
100%.
Cool. Nice. Well, nice little intro there. And then you've given me 3 topics, 2 of which are sayings, and I love a good mantra or a good saying as well, so these are absolutely perfect for me. Those 3 were, it's about giving people the room to make mistakes and grow as individuals. You get what you inspect, not what you expect, which honestly I love. I'm going to steal that one. Then the third one was more of a conversation around almost like declaring more on the podcast name, right? Rather than carrot and stick, taking a more blended approach. But I think that's a really interesting topic. So we'll go through those one by one and we'll just unpack them a little bit further. So that first one, giving people the room to make mistakes and grow. Like, both of us manage people, and I completely agree with this statement as well. I feel like you can tell someone, hey, this is going to happen if you do that. Sometimes you've got to let them just live it and make those make the mistakes in a very safe environment for them to really be able to realize and understand them and grow as a result. Yeah. What's your reflections on this line, and why is it one of your little mantras that you've rolled out here?
Yeah. So for me, my style of management changed when I had kids. And when you have kids, if you have kids, you find that, in order for kids to have the best time possible, you want to give them the freedom to enjoy and express themselves and grow, but also there need to be kind of boundaries. And my thing when it comes to kids, right, it's like, don't go too far that way because you die. Don't go too far that way because you'll die. Just enjoy all the bit in between. And I thought there was a lesson, and I don't want to sound condescending to the team here, because I'm not saying treat your team like kids. What I am saying is that it is my strong belief that you need to give people room to make mistakes. And anyone who's a parent out there will understand when I say all this experience you have in life, you try and impart that to your kids. They don't give a toss. Okay, the good news is your consultants and your staff do. They're willing to learn. But it's the balance between, no one likes being micromanaged because it's stifling. And what's the point of hiring people that probably, half the team out here have more creative bones in their body than I do in a creative industry? So you'll never unlock that if your path is too rigid. If you've only given them that much room to move, then I personally think you're limiting your business's opportunity to really drive forward.
Yeah, this is a really interesting point. I was at the RDLC Super Lunch on Friday, the Pirates, and they had a few talkers come in and do a speech there. And one was from a guy called Jamie Fraser, who runs the Interex Group, 120 odd people, 85 million odd business, absolutely massive. And he said their big focus last year was getting a lot of processes in place and then getting people to follow those processes. And I raised my hand and asked a question. I was like, how far do you go between forcing someone to follow a process, i.e. a call script, for example, the exact email templates that you're going to send and use for customers? And at what point do you give them the creativity to express themselves and do things a little bit their way? And his response really came back. You follow the process first and master that, and then you can start to show sort of your own creativity once you can see that the process works and you understand things a little bit better. And I guess to kind of come back to the kids example, it's like having training wheels on a bike, right? It's like, look, you can try all the cool stuff, you can try all your wheelies, you can try anything else once the stabilizers are off, but in the early days, We're going to keep you upright. We'll keep you focused on a straight and narrow path. We'll tell you where to go. Do you kind of feel the same, or do you feel there's maybe earlier creativity and personal expression that needs to come into a process way earlier on? Or do you think they should learn to get things right first and then be allowed to start making mistakes and experimenting a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a balance, Darian, and why that's
and no one knows the exact answer on where that balance sits as well. It's quite difficult.
And the answer is that, you know, people respond to rules differently, and you know, and I think a really responsive industry. I mean, 120 people is 3 times the size of us, right? It must be more difficult. But don't get me wrong, we've got kind of hard and fast ground rules here, but I'm talking about where you've got too many rules in place. You know, there have to be rules, right? Like putting all the data on the CRM has to be. It's not debatable. Not that it always happens, but it shouldn't be debatable. Turning up on time, trying your best, you know, kind of these loose rules. And different people react in different ways. So it's a really hard one to answer. But I guess the best example I'll give is, you know, we're often tempted to step in. And I guess the example I'll give is we're really hot here on, if we bring people on board, say someone brand new, no recruitment experience, they'll often be in a resourcer role. We will let our resourcers manage the process all the way through to offer really early on.
Wow, okay.
But into a degree, much more than I'm personally comfortable with. But my management team are happy because they're there and they're helping them and supporting them. And I guess it's that element, you know, the being present to allow people to make the mistakes is different to sending them off, which ties into the inspect expect piece, right, that we're coming to next. It's different to someone being sent off and coming back and guess what, they've messed it up, and then you get frustrated. So I think it's how you allow people and how closely you remain to them, you know, while they make those mistakes. So the example of the training wheels, I think, is a good one, because when someone's off in their training wheels, a parent would be stood there at the same time. Probably, you know, anything like I was, you'd be running alongside them, even though they've got training wheels, to make sure they don't fall off in the early stages. And that's what I'm talking about. You know, but I really want to be in a position of trust. If you get like a traffic light, right, when someone starts red, amber, green at the beginning, you could say they do nothing without speaking to you first. Where a lot of recruitment businesses, I think, end up is in amber. You never get to green. Everything they do, then they come back to you and tell you about it. And I get that, but there needs to be a point, I think, for someone's sanity when you choose the tasks that are green tasks.
Yeah, there's a really good framework that came out from Andy Grove when he wrote Intel's little magical high performance like management book all those years ago. And he speaks about skill will. I think he had a different term for it back then, but the way it's been kind of phrased today is it's all about skill will, where you have low skill or will, medium or high. And low is one of those things where it's like, I'm going to manage you through this task very prescriptively because you don't have a lot of skill or your motivation to do it is particularly low. Let me stay very close. And then at the other end of the spectrum, when it gets towards the high point, it's more like you're saying, right, here are the outcomes that we're after, that we've agreed we're going for. I'm here if you need me. But ultimately what I'm going to do is be here to coach you along the way and ask questions every now and then. But otherwise, it's fully hands off and it's on to you, right? And I think, like you say, a lot of people get stuck in the midfield where it's a bit like, you know what, actually, we will check in fairly often. I will ask you a lot of questions about how you're doing things, or you'll update me an awful lot. How have you enabled your team, or how have you coached maybe your manager specifically? Because in a dream world, managers would be very hands off when someone gets to that level. How do you teach your managers to let go? Because I imagine there's a degree of concern of, but what if they do get it wrong and therefore I do want to stay involved? How are you encouraging your team to step back and let people not just do it themselves, but also make those mistakes, right?
Yeah, I you know, hands up, I will say that, you know, I teach this, you know, talk about this stuff. I believe in it, but it's still not fully innate in me.
Yeah.
And what I find is that I will still kind of push back and ask the question of my management team, and they'll be the ones going, this is a cool one, Richard. You can step back on this. Whoever it is has got it. You know, in my experience, no one's made a complete clanger ever, where, you know, it's something catastrophic. that's let the business down. So I think it's just as some trial and error with the smaller stuff. The smaller stuff being maybe going up to just closing a deal. When it means that it's, if someone makes the trial and error there, or going through the process of not pre-closing properly, or in the really early stages, submitting someone who was never going to be really interested in that role. If you build up those elements of trust, then the really important stuff you need to be able to step back from as well. So I think it's really just trial and error.
Yeah, I like that as well. And there's the whole thing around like type 1, type 2 decisions as well, right? Is it really the end of the world if this goes wrong? If it is going to be the end of the world, then let's not, be all hands off about it. But otherwise, it's okay to let people make mistakes and for things to every now and again go wrong, because they can be fixed.
And I think there is an element, and we haven't spoken about this, which is constantly looking at your model and ensuring that you've got the right people in the right jobs. Because we have changed our model recently, that we've got, traditional model with resources and 360 consultants and a couple of 180s. But it became evident that, we had someone who's in the business who's absolutely brilliant, and her set of skills didn't really fit the 360, but she's brilliant with clients, and she's brilliant at some of the broader industry stuff, and she's incredible at events. And I think sometimes you need to create the role for the person, so for them to utilize the skills that they have. And that's, we've got a great example here of someone that basically, I almost we've given them a green light role and they're excelling. Whereas before, we were giving them an amber light role and they were doing okay. So it's the type of challenge where you see somebody think this person can be an exception, make an exceptional impact on this business. But it meant we had to take them out that 360 model and create a whole new mechanism for them to go out there and thrive in what they do. And it's working brilliant for the business because our client loyalty is just shot through the roof. We're getting more new clients on board. Our client retention's great.
Nice. I really like that. It's what we call internally right person, wrong seat. You want the right person in the right seat, right? If they're in the wrong seat, you like the person, can you move them around? If it's the wrong person in the right seat, that's when the person's really got to change. But by the sounds of it, like you guys are really good at acknowledging when someone is that right person, but maybe not quite in the right role for them to really shine and be, like you say, a green light seat.
Yeah. I think, and I've been guilty in the past of recognizing someone's not right for that particular role. And all I've done is just moved their patch and stuck them in exactly the same job. And guess what? It's not worked out.
Yeah, like it. Nice experience, hey? Cool. Let's go on to that second one then, because you mentioned this a little bit about 2 or 3 minutes ago. You mentioned it as a line as well. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. And it comes back to the whole thing, like, if it ain't tracked, it ain't fact, all that kind of stuff. If you're not looking at it, it's simply not going to happen, right? So what's your take on this? Why is it something that's quite important to you? And what examples have you got maybe of it coming to light over the years?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's watching this at XS3, they're probably shouting at the screen right now, you didn't make that up. And I didn't. It was something that I brought with me. But it's, ultimately it's a truism because, we work in a weird industry, right? Where the clients and candidates, where I don't think people are malicious generally and they don't want to go out of their way to lie. Yet miscommunication happens all the time. Getting ghosted by candidates is easy to stand and point and shout on social media about candidates doing it. But there's it happens so frequently. There's something else going on there, right? I don't think it's malicious. And I just think as a business leader, if you set your business up, give it a encouraging push forward and set it off to, wind it up to off it goes, you're going to constantly be disappointed and you're constantly going to be frustrated and you're constantly going to be angry. And that's just not a state of mind to lead a business. So there needs to be a level of inspection that comes alongside that. And a lot of that comes from having the right metrics, making sure that people understand the metrics they've got to drive their individual business forward. I'm a big fan of talking to people about it's your desk, your business. Let's make the assumption that, you're giving them all the right training, you're giving them all the right tools to do the job, you've got the skills to do the job, they've got the right strategy. then the rest is kind of down to them. And I do believe in that's where you really want to be. But still, even anyone with the best strategy, you need to understand how to track that strategy personally. And I know how busy I can get. I know how busy the consultants get. And sometimes your eyes go off the metrics because you get so focused on doing that the strategy piece, it's the cliche name, right? The battle doesn't get won in the trench. And I think fundamentally it's our duty as business leaders to help people see their business like a general. And that comes from inspecting and actually having something tangible to go back to your consultants with, rather than I've got a feeling you're not doing well. And feelings, it's an interesting one because I'm, as the CEO of the business, I'm a little bit distant. So I've got a leadership team and I'll come up with perceptions of someone. And what I really want to be is challenged by my business leaders. And I love it when they do, when I go, I'm feeling a bit like this person's behaviors are leading here. And then one of my leaders would turn around and go, you say that, but let me just pull this bit of data back. Have a look at that. How do you think about it now? And it is amazing how often we can be ruled by how we feel. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't acknowledge your feelings. You feel how you feel, right? You have to accept that. But it's also important not to run off based on a feeling about someone. Your response is to someone for the whole day might be really driven by the fact that you saw them walking 5 minutes late. But then, later in the day, you find out they actually had a really good reason for that. And it changes your perception. Yeah. So what I'm really keen on is, inspecting, having conversations with people is often the easiest way. And again, from a CEO perspective, fortunately, we're small enough business that I will still walk around and chat. I'll sit on the floor. I'll go around and chat to the floor. Okay, they put me in a corner of the floor, and I'll get off my backside and walk around. But you need the metrics to support, because again, what you were told might not necessarily be what's happened, and you need to be in a position to challenge it. It's healthy, right, to be able to challenge anything across the business.
As long as you can do it with data is the most important part there, right? Rather than just feelings, as you say.
100%. It's got to be based on fact.
Yeah. Are you guys predominantly perm as a business? I assume you are, right?
Yeah, well, the games industry is predominantly perm. Yeah. The tech piece we've got is predominantly contracts, but predominantly perm. To
ask the $1 million question that I'm sure any recruitment MD would love to know, what are the right metrics? You mentioned right metrics a few times there. What sort of things do you track in your business?
Yeah. We track the obvious ones, CVs, interviews, conversion rates, time to fill. But ultimately, I have a view, because I was always a contract recruiter, and I would say that I would expect to fill any contract role you put in front of me. I would hope to fill any perm role you put in front of me. And that was kind of my mindset. But my mindset shifted recently, which is, hold on, this is not a good mindset. I should be expecting to fill every perm role. So really, when it comes to inspection, it's not really a core metric that's trackable. The most important part of that inspection is what happened when a job comes on, and how you query that job and establish whether it's whatever your process is, whether it's an what you call an A grade role or a B, C, or whether you've got a really solid job scorecard. And my view would be, if you're A, B, C, based on, I've just pulled this role, I think I can fill it, it's an A, the most important metric for me is around that job scorecard. And the good news is there's plenty of really great job scorecards that are available out there for free. And that for me is the transformational element of the process. If you get the job scorecard right, then your consultant will know that what they need to do to fill the job. They'll need to know that, or they'll know if they can fill the job or not. They'll need to know what they need to do to fill the job. They'll need to know, or they will know how long it will take to fill the job. So really, from perm, the level of inspection comes from someone has just taken a job. The first thing that happens, and most CRMs out there will flag when someone's registered a job, will be to go and sit with that consultant and have a conversation with them about the job that they've just registered, so you can work out where it fits against the other stuff they may be working. Because I think there is a habit, particularly when times are a little more sticky like they are now. It's like, my God, I've the metrics show I've pulled a job. I can relax. I've kind of, it's almost, pulling the job is the success, and it's part of the success. Let's not deny that, but there's a bigger picture going on here, because it's really easy to be another, age-old expression, to be a busy fool if you're out there putting roles that you're never gonna fill.
It's a really interesting conversation about like dashboard managers, those that literally sit there and look at dials and go, cool, everything's fine, like it's green, there's nothing else for me to do. Whereas you've got onto a really point there, or at least touched on it, is when it comes to reporting, analytics, dashboards, whatever it might be, the answers that you take away from those, or the indications they give you, should really lead to an action, right? And like you said there, the action that comes from a job being added is to go and sit down and really explore and understand that job actually with the consultants themselves and say, have you got everything you need here to guarantee this is going to be a success? And it could be the same for arranging an interview, for getting an offer out, for example. What else can we do to ensure this goes through to the next stage of the pipeline? And it's very much inspect to understand and then go and take action off the back of it, right?
Absolutely. I think from metrics, it's sometimes too easy to throw out their generic metrics. For example, let's say, right, every job we get on should be 3, 2, 1, 3 CVs, 2 interviews, placement. But that's not realistic. If someone's got a role and you're managing them against that implied metric that you've rolled out because that's what you do for your business, that person's just pulled a job, there's no way they're going to get 3 CVs out.
No.
It's just so hard. But actually, we might be able to find 1 or 2 absolute perfect fits for that, but you're never going to get 3, so you can't manage them against that metric. So everything falls out the back of that. And I guess what I'm saying is that, and this kind of leads on to the third point that I had, is that you can't one size fits all for your consultants, and you can't one size fits all for your clients. You can kind of one size individual clients, because you can build out your own metrics and expectations around that particular client and delivery around them, and the same with your consultants. But to one size it all, I think is a mistake that we often make. And that's from experience, right? That's what I've done in the past.
Got it. Nice. Last question around this area for you then as well. And this, again, kind of somewhat ties on to the third point we'll go into in a minute as well. Setting the right mindset for metrics and not having them be a stick, essentially, right? Because I think many hear the word KPI and it feels like a dirty term, right? Even to the stage that people now are going out there and saying, oh, if you're applying for a job here, our big selling feature is that we don't have KPIs in this business, which feels a little bit crazy to not be given that level of direction, but it really speaks to the psychology of almost like not running a boiler room-esque shop where it's like, right, you do 100 calls a day and you go home, you had this many jobs a week, or you can't go home, or whatever it might be. So how do you, with your team, communicate that realistically those metrics aren't there to, beat them around the head with? It's much more about trying to have a conversation and make sure things are being done properly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. You wouldn't, if you were a football manager, hire a bunch of stars and then just go, off you go. Well, how are we going to play, boss? No, just go out there, have a good time. There needs to be some kind of focus and strategy about what happens on the pitch. And it's the same in the business. I don't believe in a non-KPI business. But the way I'd approach it is, or the way we do approach it here, is that over a period of time, all of your staff are going to build their own individual stats. So at the beginning, when someone starts, we would have a set of metrics based around the team that person's joined. And that will be around, what statistical activity you need to do to go out there and generate a vacancy. Once you've generated a vacancy, some rough idea about, CVs, interviews, conversion. And we'll discuss it. So going back to what I said earlier about your desk, your business, right? So if it's your desk, your business, then we need to give you the tools to do the job. And I mentioned earlier, the tools to the job, the strategy's got to be right, the training's got to be right, the tech stack you give them's got to be right. And as part of that tech stack, they need to be able to pull out the data points so they know the data points that will lead them to success. And the way we frame it here is that, what makes you feel good in recruitment, right? I want everybody walking out the door every single day going, I've had a good day today. And the reality is we focus on deals. Good times at recruitment equal deals. And yes, they do, but you're not going to do, a deal every day for 22 days of a working month. So what on earth do you do to make people feel good? Well, this is where these metrics come in. So if it's your desk, your business, the metric that you need over the course of this week to have a good week might look like X. It might look like if you've just started, week 1 as a 360 consultant, and week 2 might look like forget about jobs. It might look like you speak to every day, you identify 30 candidates to call, you look to have 10 meaningful conversations out of those, and then you look to identify X amount of clients. You do an initial reach out and look to build up 2, significant meetings or 1 significant meeting per week in your first 3-4 weeks. And suddenly you're not framing it as KPIs, although you can go on to, OneUp or whatever tool you use and look at those hard metrics. And you can set them as hard metrics as a target so they can see if they're tracking it or not. But it suddenly doesn't feel like a hard metric. It feels like these are the things I need to do to know that A, I'm progressing my business, and B, that these are the signposts that will lead me to the success of bringing on amazing clients and doing deals.
It's almost like rather than going from 0 to 100 and it's either 0 or it's 100 in doing a deal, it's trying to set those kind of progress milestones along the way so you can see that movement towards the end goal.
100%. And funny enough, one of the metrics we look at here is who's looking at OneUp. Because if someone's not looking, then they maybe don't understand the importance of the metrics, but we want them to look off their own volition, right? Because they're bought into, these are the stats that will help me achieve what I want to achieve with my business, which is my desk.
Yeah.
Rather than Richard tells me that I need to do 5 of these, 3 of these, 2 of these, and send 8 of these per day. Why? I'm doing it because Richard's telling me I've got to do it. And going back to beginning of the conversation, that for me feels the category of me saying to my kids, you've got to do this because I know best. And, even if they do it, which they won't, when it comes to my kids, they will be done begrudgingly. And that reframing, that mindset needs to be about, okay, we've got this amazing tool available to help manage these stats. So I'm gonna look at it for my own benefit.
Got it. Absolutely love that. Cool. On to our last bit then. We spoke a little bit around this one. This is the most interesting one because no one else has really said it before. You said essentially, I disagree with the carrot and stick approach, which obviously is quite meta given it's the name of the podcast. And I said, you know what? I love that. Let's go into that. And you said it's much more about the blended approach. It's much more about the stick kind of being implicit. People know if things aren't working out, there's a very good chance that they won't last long in the job, right? Rather than a manager strictly having to tell them that. But give me your whole philosophy behind this then. Why a blended approach versus a very kind of like black and white carrot versus stick?
Yeah, it's a guess. This has come from experience. So, early days, I'd call it carrot and stick. When I felt I was more refined, I'd call it, away from and toward motivators. Because, an away from motivator sounds less brutal than whacking someone with a stick. But I've realized for me, I've realized over the last 5-6 years that I don't like the terminology at all. And if it's anything, I'd rather it was carrot, right? Just carrot. If everything in this job was carrot, then life would be a better place. And I think the stick bit in recruitment, there is, and it ties in what we were just talking about, because it ties into the mentality around, here's my metrics. If I don't hit these metrics, I'll get a kicking. I'll get someone in my ear telling me to work harder or do more. And I realized that we got better response and better buy-in if we reframed it as, okay, these are KPIs, but these are your KPIs. And, what I was going to talk about earlier is, what we do over time is we look at someone's specific metrics. So if someone's been here 6 months, 12 months, beyond, they will have a specific set of metrics based around their business performance. So we're not just saying, here's a generic KPI, they're completely individualized to each consultant. So suddenly, you've got a set of metrics there that they know the end goal. And I think, it's recruitment, right? This isn't a job that you can hide in. Nobody joins a recruitment company because it's safe. So already there's an implicit stick that if you aren't doing the job, you'll lose your job. Not making money, you lose your job. So why do we need more layers to it than that, or phrase it like that? And I just think, it means a bit of a change in language. And don't get me wrong, it's the same data. It's the same stats that, we always used to use. But we just frame it in a different way, and we don't frame it one size fits all. As I say, we make it specific to their business. And then who can argue when you're sitting in front of someone saying, here are the metrics to your business. What do you want to achieve? Okay, that's cool. If you want to achieve that, then by the end of the year, then we can work that backwards. And this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like monthly. And some of this you can break down to what it looks like daily and track that. And that all comes back to, I know my metrics. I've done X today. I've had a good day. I'm walking out of here feeling really good when I go home. And that's really the vibe, the feel that we want. Because if people feel good when they leave, right, they're going to feel great when they come in the morning.
And I love that, how I sense it. I think you point out like it's a blended approach, because you're kind of agreeing between yourselves by setting out, right, here's where you want to be at year end. Here's what the day-to-day and the week-to-week needs to look like here. That's not me saying to you, do that or you're in deep trouble. It's more, we both understand that is the expectation of what we're going to do here. And you can see how that bubbles up to a great year, how the actions you take today will affect next week, the month after, whatever else it might be. Do you think, in a sense, then, that the stick approach is very much kind of the ways of old, that really no one should be thinking in that way anymore? I mean, for what it's worth, I don't think they should. Like, I very much think that metrics should be more used to motivate rather than being something you hold someone to and say, if you don't meet these, you're in trouble. You made 59 calls out of 60. Like, how dare you? Or you're one short on your CV sends for the week. It's not really the way to do things, is it, when you think about it in that sense? But do you think that sort of approach is now sort of fading out, or what?
You say that, but, I'm not going to tell anyone how to run their business. And I think that some people thrive in that environment. And if you walk through, and I guess it's how you sell an opportunity, right? And if you walk through the door and it's set out, this is what it's like. Because I bet at those environments, from experience, right, environments that are kind of tough in terms of the way they're driven can also be a really good laugh. It's not the way I do it. I think, we have evolved since then, but I'm not going to, these are my kind of suggestions about the way we do it here, or recommendations if people want to do something different. But I would never tell someone how to run their business. But for me, it doesn't work. But I'm not that type of person. I want to walk out of here feeling good every day. And if I've walked out and the vibe and the conversation, the meetings have been really negative because, they're all around how people have failed in their metrics or whatever. I'm not saying you shy away from that, but it's all about framing it. You talk about, bollocking someone because they've not done their metrics, or having a conversation about why their metrics aren't going to get them to where they've set where they want to be. And
then it's more about going on the journey together rather than being prescriptive and saying, well, you haven't done what I told you should do, therefore you're in trouble, right? Yeah. Which I love, because this is something I always reflect on, is you look online for, like, you can try and Google like business advice about anything, and there's probably going to be about 10 different ways of doing it. And everyone's like, this is the only way to do it. It's the right way to do it. Whereas you look at, say, the next article or the next video, whatever it is that you might be looking at, and someone's telling you, no, this other way is the only way to do it. And the real truth is, there's 1,000,001 ways to get a certain thing done. The outcome here that we're all after ultimately is high-performing people who hit targets, bring in good numbers, make good money for themselves, for example. And like you said there, you choose to do it one way. It doesn't strictly mean it's the only way to do it. There are several ways you can approach these things.
100%. The work from home debate, I got really bored of people telling me, because we're hybrid, but we're 4 days in, 1 day off, and we took the view really early. In fact, I think we set the tone during the second lockdown when they said work from home if you can. That a few of us went, I can't work from home. So a few of us would come into the office, and it set the tone for people in the office. But then at the same time, I'm looking on LinkedIn and I'm seeing people telling me that my business is going to fail in 2 years because I'm in the office.
Yeah.
It's not that binary. Although what I will
It's
say about work from home is if you're not inspecting around work from home performance, you should be.
it's that classic thing of coming back to not how things feel, which, let's be honest, is how a lot of social media goes. It's all about the engagement, the clicks, the kind of like trying to draw out responses and interactions from people. And like you say, look at the data. Is it actually working for you? If it's not, then something should change, because at that point, it's only about data and logic. It's no real emotion being injected into it. But
Yeah.
I'm with you. I got tired of that debate. I had to kind of bow after it a while. I was like, you know what? We're a fully remote business, for example. We do have everyone based in the UK. We do meet up every 6 weeks or so, but otherwise we are purely remote, and that works fine for us. Whereas others would say, you need to be in London, you've got to hire a sales team in London, they must be in the office for you to be a successful software business. Like you said, there's just so many ways that you can go about doing it. I am curious though, we spoke about the stick a little bit there. When it comes to the carrot, what is it that you're using to motivate people then? So we spoke about sitting down, agreeing, you want to get to this point by the end of the year. We've worked backwards. Here's how you get there. What else are you doing to drive people to really keep them motivated day to day when, you're being told no potentially 20 times a day, or losing really key deals? What do you guys do?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because from a carrot perspective, one of the other really evident things for me. So firstly, people deserve a lot of praise for the things they're doing well. And again, I don't know if it's a British thing, always quick to complain, never quick to praise. You'd be more likely to leave a review of a crap experience you've had at a restaurant rather than a good experience you've had at a restaurant, right? And I think it's natural of us to, get involved in, trying to fix stuff rather than praise the stuff that's going really, really well. So I'd strongly suggest that, anyone looks at a praise culture, and it could be, and when I talk about praise culture, it's not just about, let's just celebrate that person's done a deal. I'm not saying don't celebrate a deal. Absolutely celebrate a deal. But you need to be celebrating all the other aspects of the job in the same way. Someone brings a new client on board. Someone does an amazing call. That's something that we should be talking about and celebrating, particularly in a world where, a lot of how in the S3 days we learned was by osmosis, not by classroom, because we didn't train in classrooms, and you'd learn from what you heard around you. And people are on the phone a lot less these days, so it's more difficult to learn from celebrating someone who sent a really good email. Although that said, that is I've never thought it would come to this, but there is a discussion about that, about incredibly crafted emails here, and we share those rounds. So I think it's about celebrating the wins really vocally for every aspect of what people do. And it's funny how the carrot is, I've come from an environment where you're driven by kind of the kudos and the money to a strong degree. And I've kind of, there's different measures to success, particularly for a lot of the people I employ out here now. Yeah, it's about the success of doing deals and the money that comes with it. But I reckon, for half the people there, if I said, would you rather $5,000 or an extra 5 days off? A lot of them would really struggle with making a decision on that, because people are just driven by completely different carrots. Our office is in Brighton. Our main office is in Brighton, so people love time off. So a lot of what we motivate people towards is extra time off, and that seems to be a really good driver for people. Also great for the business, because you lose a day. It doesn't cost anything extra. So really, for me, it's about celebrating all the smaller successes. If you are inspecting more closely, you're in a position to give people really positive feedback. So again, the inspection thing's not, here I come with my stick. It's, I'm coming to help, and guess what? You've done loads of brilliant things here. Well done. I think that's how we, the way the process works across the business.
Nice. That's a pretty comprehensive view on it as well, which I absolutely love. I guess to wrap up this session then, before we go into the kind of like horror story and favorite story over the last 27 years, what's the one thing you feel that you've learned the most about how to motivate people, maybe over the last 10 years more specifically?
I think the number one thing that people really appreciate is time. And no matter how far you get in the business, I think what people want is time with kind of their manager. And I think that if you've got a culture where you set a target at the beginning of the month, and then you next meet at the end of the month, and there's not that communication in between, then something's awry. And I'm not on about hard communication. I'm just, stop and chat, but also show a bit of interest in their business and show a bit of interest in their metrics. Because it just shows beyond right, here's your targets. Do you have a nice weekend? Well done on your targets, or you haven't hit your targets in 30 days' time. There's the stuff in between that will help them get towards there. And I think it creates a different level of buy-in as well.
Nice. Love it. Cool. Nice. Thank you for that. Right. Stories. These are some of my favorite parts of these podcasts now, because you've obviously got probably a good number of years of experience in which I'm sure you've got some great stories from. So I want your favorite sales story. When does something go really right? It can be for you. It can be about someone that you've managed. And then a horror story. When does something go horribly wrong? Again, either for you or for someone you've managed.
Yeah. I find this a tough one because most of the stories have a peripheral to kind of the main job, because I think I've been fortunate enough that I'm not. Oh no, I have had horror stories. Don't get me wrong, but in terms of this, the kind of the positive stuff, it seems to have been fairly evenly spread. So I can't put my finger on one massive win that we got out there. Although saying that, we've got one going on in the background at the moment that could be absolutely transformational for us. So I don't know if I've got any kind of exciting story for you, Derry, I'm afraid.
No person winning their first deal, or you doing something really special that really helps someone, or a key client saying something nice. It could be anything. Surely there's something.
Right. Okay, I'll give you a story from Computer Futures.
Okay.
That I joined. I did 5 deals in my second week, and the way to celebrate that, there's an expression out there where you shout "bosh" when you did a deal. But the guy managing me said, "Okay, you've done 5 deals. You're gonna climb on this wheelie chair. I'm gonna push you through the sales floor. I want you to shout "bosh," and after that, you've got to shout "you're all shit." I was like, okay, I can do that. So we did that. Week 2, week 3, first guy turns up to start his contract. 2 days in, he gets sacked, and they sacked before they started all the other 4 people that were due to join. So it's like, "Bosh, you're all shit," and then kind of the walk of shame to take the deals off the board just a week later.
That's incredible. Did everyone turn to you and go, "You're shit" on that walk of shame by any chance?
First month of business.
That's incredible. That actually kind of backs quite nicely into a horror story, actually, because it could fall through as both in a sense. But have you got a horror story that you can think of then off the back of that?
No, you know what? None of them are fully related. They're all kind of peripheral things that have happened. Going on I started the Dutch Computer Futures office. And I remember, when we first started, we'd fly over there for 2-3 days and set up a bunch of meetings. And I remember going around the south of Amsterdam in a taxi with one of my consultants. I was the team lead at the time, going, "Where is this place?" And he went, "Don't worry, Richard, I'll phone them." Yeah, okay, yeah. They moved to The Hague last month. So not only were we never going to find the client, they were in a completely different city.
Oh my God.
Horror stories like that. Horror stories, one of the guys I was with, no, I won't share that one. That's one too much.
I'll tell you what, this happens. People always catch themselves about to go, maybe I shouldn't share that one, actually.
I don't think I'll be doing any favours, because he'd know exactly who he is as well, because he's still in the industry.
Well, that'd be a good one over a beer at some point, I'm sure. Awesome. Absolutely. All right, cool. Quick fire then. Just a few quick questions here that may be helpful to those out there listening as well. Favorite book that you've read?
Oh my God. You're probably going to want something work related, right?
Ideally, yeah. Go on.
Work related. I loved a book called The Luck Factor, which I don't even exist as a book anymore. But basically, it was a piece of work done by a professor which looked into the mindset around luck and why lucky people are lucky and why unlucky people are lucky. And spoiler alert, there is no such thing as luck. But I think from a recruitment perspective, there's really great stuff out there when lucky people absorb information in a different way, they process it in a different way, they put themselves out there in more situations to be lucky. So luck is one of those words that, I always pick up on it. If someone goes, oh my God, I've just been so unlucky. I think there's always something you could look at, right? To debunk that. So the luck
I'm a big fan of that. You make your own luck. I'm a big fan of that as well. So I'm totally with that. Favorite LinkedIn influencer, and I hate saying the term, but who do you look to on LinkedIn for good advice?
Okay. So I will say partly because I think his story is incredible. Also partly because I think I've got to say it because I was so influenced by his story. I brought him on board. He was working as as an external consultant for us for many years. Here is Chris O'Connell.
Nice, like it.
Yeah,
you don't really hear things like Stephen Bartlett, so I'm glad actually that there's someone quite specific there, which is great.
Someone in the industry. It's got to be someone in the industry, right?
I agree.
Chris has got a very real story, and part of it, a story of success, and partly a story of when things go horribly wrong. So I love that kind of that journey of someone who's made it, broke them, fixed it. Because I think you've got more to learn.
Love it. Cool. And then the last three are kind of cheating because they're sort of three questions really coming together in one. It's a top tip for three different people. First one is for aspiring managers, maybe those that are top-level consultants that want to get into managing a team. What's the top tip you've got for them? Another one for current managers, those that have been doing it for a couple of years and looking to get to that next level, maybe go towards being a real leader in a business. What's your top tip for them? And then the third one will be people like you who have been leaders of businesses for a while. What's your top tip for them?
Oh, man. Okay.
Aspiring managers.
I feel for you because it's the aspiring management, it's like the bidding team lead. It still remains the toughest job in the industry. At some stage, you need to start thinking differently because all the things that made you brilliant as a consultant aren't necessarily the skills that are going to make you brilliant as a manager. And the great thing is, compared to when I got into recruitment, there's so much content out there. You can get podcasts, books, audio books, YouTube channels to help support that. But, you've got to think differently. And that really comes from a place of empathy. And what I mean by empathy is not feeling sorry for anyone, sympathy, but it's understanding someone else's perspective from their viewpoint. And that's where you need to be to start managing effectively. Understand, why you're saying, let's do this, and then not following you. So that would be my main bit of advice, empathy.
Like it, nice. And what about current managers?
Yeah, to current managers, the best bit of advice I can get. So when you've made that transition, the role starts to get lonely. And I was talking about the best time I ever had in this job, and it was when I was a consultant. And I've not been that for many years. And the job starts to get more lonely. And I think the most important thing you can do as a manager and as a business leader, right, is start to work out who your peers are and make sure that you have someone to speak to about your shared experience and someone to learn with and learn from. And that would kind of lead into similar advice for, kind of business leaders, I think. That, it's strange. Obviously, I've spent most of my career in London. It's only since I came here I'm in Brighton. And despite the fact that there are loads of recruitment businesses in Brighton, there's no kind of local community. You mentioned right at the beginning of the call, I think, Derry, that you were at RDLC lunch. So there are organisations like RDLC, other brands are available, where you can go and get that advice and support as well. So again, I think it's a similar piece of advice is, the further you go, the lonelier it can be. It's really important that you find who your people are and build up a relationship with a different peer group. Or, go out like we did and find an external to help support with that.
Yeah, the saying that I always think about when I think about that sort of thing is find your tribe. Those that are like you, that can help you, Some are a bit further ahead than where you are, some who are where you are today. So you can share all kinds of stories and get all kinds of advice, right? And that is really important to have that support network.
You can get in an echo chamber, that, you built your team up and then you're talking to your team, but they're obviously bought into, your Kool-Aid. Otherwise they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be in those roles. So what you find is your own ideas echo back at you. And I think it's really important that you take a step out of that. What's the best way? Again, the sport analogy. If you want to learn a sport, you want to get better at tennis, what do you need to do? You need to play tennis against someone who's slightly better than you that's going to drive you forward. And it's the same thing in the job. You need to be going out there and trying to get all the advice that you possibly can.
Love it. Amazing. Cool. Really appreciate those. And those tips are all really good. I'm sure we'll clip them up at some point. Where can people find you then if they want to reach out, want to follow your journey, anything like that? Is LinkedIn best or anywhere else that maybe you use?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best. Richard Fisher, Skillsearch, really easy to find.
Perfect. And then any shout outs you want to make, anything else you'd like to mention here at the end? It can be a plug about Skillsearch, it can be anything.
Yeah, I'm not going to plug Skillsearch. Really, just an acknowledgement based on what I just said to the people like Chris, like Paul Glynn, the people externally that I've reached out to that have had a really transformational impact on the business. There's a lot of knowledge out there. You've got to go and find it, right? So
it won't come to you.
I'm happy to.
Amazing. Right, Richard, that's been amazing. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the talk and look forward to seeing how things go for Skillsearch over the next year or so.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Terry.